Our connection was instant. I knew that it was the kind of love that's meant to last a lifetime as soon as we met. All I wanted was to spend time with you and feel your affection. You were my main priority, and I loved you so much that I often worried if I was even good enough for you. But our feelings must have been mutual because we started to build a life together. Very early in our relationship, I started to notice that it didn't take much for me to anger you, and I was scared that you would decide that I was too much and leave me, so I tried my best to understand your mood and keep you happy. I had never been in a relationship before, and I knew that I had a lot to learn. I made a lot of mistakes, but working hard for your approval kept me going. One day, when we were out for a walk, I tried to hold your hand, and you gently pushed me away, and when we got home, you grabbed my face and squeezed it so hard I could hardly see anything. You told me to never act so needy in public again and keep everything private. I didn't understand what was happening, but the fear of seeing you so angry was enough to never do that again. I watched you carefully, and I thought I was getting better at keeping things well between us, but it didn't take long till I felt like I had messed up again. We were at a party with a few friends when you unexpectedly pulled me closer and said, "See what I have to do to get a hug? She's so mean to me," and everybody laughed. I was so confused because I thought you found it needy and didn't like it, but I certainly didn't want to be mean to you. You had made it clear to keep everything private, so I waited till we got home and tried to ask you about it, and you proceeded to deny that you had ever told me to withhold affection. You said that you tried to hug me at the party to save my reputation and stop others from thinking that I was mean, and to never question you again because I sounded like a schizophrenic, accusing you of something you hadn't done. It made me feel like I was a bad person, so I apologized and tried to be more vigilant going forward and ensure that I understood everything the first time. There was a big difference in how we got along when we were alone around strangers or your friends. My biggest worry had always been your best friend who once pinned me down in our home and pretended to strangle me with a blanket. It upset me and I didn't understand why you allowed that, but when I expressed it, you told me that it was just a joke and to stop being so dramatic. You also told me that you could have pimped me out if you wanted to, so I should be grateful that I didn't know what real suffering was thanks to your protection. I felt that you wouldn't be protecting me from harm if you didn't care about me, therefore it must have been just a silly joke and I was too sensitive. One day you came home from work in an awful mood and everything I did seemed to irritate you even more until you suddenly grabbed my hair and slammed my face into the wooden bed frame while screaming that there is nothing that I can ever do right. I was begging you to let go, and when you finally did, you told me that I was nothing but a burden ruining your life. I cried myself to sleep and worried that you had finally had enough and it was only a matter of time before things were over. You knew that I had no family left, and I started to think that you no longer wanted any of this and simply felt an obligation to keep a roof above my head because I had nowhere else to go. I started to feel unwell and my head injury was concerning, so you suggested that I should see a doctor, and I found out that I had a concussion. I was asked what happened and I got embarrassed and said it was an accident. I didn't think that anyone would ever believe me that you had a temper, and I thought it was my fault anyway. My appointment was followed by bed rest, and in that time you were kind to me. You even encouraged that I stay home until the bruises fade. It reassured me that you still cared about me and that I needed to try harder to stop causing arguments. I tried to remain positive and stay out of your way, which was quite easy because you were gone a lot. It saddened me how cold you seemed, but I was glad you had been able to keep a job for a while, and it was going well because one day you told me that payday weekend was coming up and we would do something nice together. But Friday came and you did not return home from work, and I tried to reach you because I had suspicions you were out drinking with your friends. You told me to stop spoiling your free time and that I was being a schizophrenic again and to stay home and wait for you or there would be consequences. You didn't say when you would be back, but I waited and didn't leave the apartment even when I ran out of food in case you returned and found that I wasn't there. You returned about a week later, reeking of alcohol and looking very frail. I asked you what happened and it angered you. All you said was that I wasn't worth it and your life would have turned out better if you weren't stuck with me. You then went to sleep and I listened to you snore while pondering what could I do to improve our relationship. Perhaps you needed some space and my lack of independence was indeed the cause of our problems, but I had nowhere else to go, and that also didn't explain why you insisted for me to stay. It wasn't long till you woke up and suddenly you were so poorly that an ambulance was needed, and seeing you in that state scared me so much that I felt awful for even thinking about leaving. I couldn't imagine life without you, and the thought of losing you was horrifying. It turned out to be alcohol poisoning with further complications, and you were in complete denial that alcohol was the cause of your health issues. But there was no denying that this incident caused you to lose yet another job and that you would be bedbound for some time. And in that time, I felt a strange sense of security knowing that you were too weak to harm me or yourself, but I felt awful for having those thoughts. At the end of the day, I wanted you to be well, and I wanted to be with you. I wasn't even thinking about the unhappy picture that our relationship was, because to me our love was worth fighting for, and the longer it went on, the more I wanted to stay, or it would have all been a waste. But it didn't take long to see that not having to dodge your fists didn't ease anything, and I realized for the first time that I had been so busy looking out for physical violence that I hadn't even noticed that it was actually your words cutting deeper than anything. You had always said that without you I would have nothing, that nobody else would ever want me, how fat and pathetic I was, and that anyone who still hung out with me did so out of pity. I had reached my breaking point, and I had no idea what else to do, and I felt like a complete failure. You had convinced me that there was no life outside of our relationship, but it seemed like there was no life left in it either, and I started to have thoughts so dark that it scared me. I didn't want to be your burden anymore, and I wanted to end this suffering for good. I pictured meeting my late grandmother again, and memories of her started flooding in. She had sadly lost her beloved husband very suddenly and had decided to never remarry, but she still wore her wedding band. It occurred to me just how hard she had worked to make the ends meet on her own, but how well she managed that, because I remember her being happy, having hobbies, making friends, and living a fulfilling life. I recall her saying that it's never too late to start over, and she was my inspiration. I was no longer scared of what you would do if I tried to leave, because I was more scared of what I would do to myself if I stayed any longer. When I was finally ready and it was time to tell you, all you did was laugh and tell me that I wouldn't survive a day without you. I left your apartment with one suitcase and very little savings, and my goal was to get as far away as possible because I knew that I wasn't strong enough to stop you from working your way back in. After I left, you continued to contact me and you seemed surprised that I had found stability. You managed to convince me that I owe you for everything that you had done for me and kept hinting that you could do with financial help. I tried to support you, hoping that we could still be together one day, but that didn't last because I could never meet your expectations and nothing was ever enough. Your attitude stayed the same and my hopes of reconciling started to diminish until I finally stopped responding to your messages. I can now see that you were never committed to me, and after I was gone you seemed to be moving on with your life pretty quickly. It still baffles me how my love for you could remain so strong no matter what you did, but I never even heard the words "I love you" no matter how hard I tried. But I've heard that you carry a victim's trophy and complain how heavy it is, but I'm starting to believe that the guilt I carry for leaving you is much heavier. You will never hear from me again, but I wish you well and I still think about you, especially today. Happy Mother's Day.